Almost everything you've heard about how to make a man fall for you was written for a 30-year-old man. The advice about playing hard to get, about staying mysterious, about making him chase you, that advice isn't wrong. Just aimed at the wrong man. Think about the man in your life right now. He's lived 60, 70 years. He's already built a career, raised children, buried friends, faced his own mortality. He's not trying to prove himself to the world anymore. He already did that. What he's quietly aching for is something almost nobody talks about. Not excitement, not chase, something much simpler and much harder to give. Once you see what it is, you'll understand something strange. Some women, without even trying, make a man over 60 feel more alive than he has in years. Others do everything right by the old rules and just watch him slowly disappear into himself. Stay with me. This isn't about tricks. It's about finally seeing him clearly. Why playing hard to get backfire after 60? You've probably heard this before. Pull back a little. Don't be too available. Let him wonder where you are. And honestly, that advice isn't wrong. For a different age, there's real science behind it. When the brain anticipates something uncertain, dopamine spikes. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling hard to walk away from. Distance, used carefully, does create a kind of pull, but that pull works on a brain that's still hunting. A man at 30 is wired to chase, to compete, to close the gap between who he is and who he wants the world to see him, as scarcity for him feels like a challenge. It lights something up. A man at 60 has already run that race for decades. He chased the promotion, proved himself to his boss, his father, maybe his first wife. He spent 40 years trying to be enough for a world that kept moving the bar. Now, most days, that world has stopped asking. The reason lies in a profound shift in behavioral psychology with age. According to Stanford psychologist Laura Carstenson's socio-emotional selectivity theory, when people become aware that their remaining time is no longer limitless, they automatically shift their life priorities. Instead of curiosity toward novelty or excitement about the chase, older adults tend to prioritize relationships that offer deep, genuine connection and peace. At 60, time itself becomes the most precious asset, not something to waste on exhausting guessing games. So when you go quiet, when you become hard to reach, when you create the distance the advice tells you to create, his filter for experience won't translate that into intriguing mystery. Instead, he'll read it as a lack of seriousness or a lack of interest in him. And rather than chase for an answer, many men at this age will simply withdraw to protect their own peace and to look for something clearer, more stable. A friend of mine told me about a conversation he had with a man in his 60s, someone he'd known for years. The man said, "When she stopped calling as much, I didn't think she was mysterious. I thought I'd done something wrong and just hadn't figured out what yet." That's not a man who needs more mystery. That's a man who's spent 60 years quietly wondering if he's enough. Another woman in her late 50s discovered the same lesson from the opposite direction. She used to feel guilty for taking too much, for seeming too eager. Then one day she stopped holding back. She said what she felt, when she felt it, without performing distance. She didn't actually feel. Her partner told her something she never forgot. "You're the first person in years who didn't make me guess two different women. Two different instincts, same truth underneath." What actually works at this age isn't scarcity. It's what I call intentional presence, not being available every moment, but when you are present, making it clear you chose to be. There's a difference between a woman who doesn't call because she's busy and a woman who calls at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday and says, "I was thinking about you today and I wanted to hear your voice." One creates absence, the other creates meaning. He's not trying to win you anymore. He's trying to know that being with you still means something. And if presence is the first shift, the second one is even more specific. It's not just about being there. It's about what you reflect back to him when you are The mirror that looks back. There's a powerful idea in the video I mentioned earlier. The idea of being a mirror for a man, reflecting back to him who he can become. And it works, it genuinely works, but not the way they describe it. When you tell a 30-year-old man that you see something greater in him, something the world hasn't seen yet, you light up the part of his brain that's still hungry, still building, still trying to become. That version of the mirror faces forward toward potential, toward a future self. He's racing to catch. Try that with a man at 60, and something different happens. He's heard that kind of reflection before. From his mother, from old mentor, from people who believed in him when he was young. But somewhere in the last decade, the voices that said you could be more started to quiet down, not because he failed, often because he succeeded, retired, moved into the background of other people's stories, and the silence that replaced those voices can be louder than anything you'd expect. So when you hold up that forward-facing mirror and say, "I see what you could still become," it lands differently than you intend. It can feel just slightly like what he has already done wasn't quite enough. The mirror a man at 60 needs faces the other direction. Not "I see who you could become," but "I see who you have been, and I don't think you've stopped being that person." There's a difference between those two sentences that is hard to explain, but easy to feel. One puts the value somewhere in the future, still out of reach. The other places it right here, in the man sitting across from you, already earned, already real. Oxytocin, the hormone most associated with deep human bonding, rises not when we are challenged, but when we feel genuinely seen, not praised. Seen, there's a version of recognition that goes deeper than a compliment. It's when someone reflects back to you something true that you were starting to forget about yourself. You don't need to manufacture this. You just need to notice things, the way he still fixes things without being asked. The way he tells a story and the whole room pays attention without him realizing it. The way he remembers details about people he cares about, say it out loud specifically. Not "You're such a good man, but I noticed you remembered her birthday." You've always been like that, haven't you? That's the mirror, and when it faces the right direction, it doesn't just make him feel good. It reminds him he's still here. Presence, done right, tells him he matters. The mirror aimed the right way tells him he still is who he was. But there's a third thing, something quieter, and it may be the most important of all. The fear he never names. When was the last time you needed him for something real? Not a gesture, not something you could have handled yourself and just let him do to be kind. Actually needed him, his specific experience, particular way of thinking through a problem. Take a moment with that question, because here's what I've come to understand about men at this stage of life. The fear that sits heaviest in them isn't the one you might expect. It's not the fear of being left. It's not the fear of growing old. It's something quieter and harder to name. It's the fear of becoming unnecessary. There's a particular kind of loss that happens around 60, 70 years old that nobody warns men about. The job ends. The children find their footing and stop calling as much. The body starts making its own decisions. And one day a man looks around and realizes that the roles that used to give his life its shape, the person people turn to, the one who fixed things, who knew things, who showed up when it mattered, those roles have been quietly filled by someone else or simply stopped being asked for. He doesn't talk about this. Most men don't have the language for it, but you can feel it in the way he hesitates before offering an opinion now. In the way he says you probably already know this, but before sharing something he actually knows very well. That hesitation is not humility. It's a man quietly testing whether he still has something worth giving. And this is where the third shift lives. Not in grand gestures. In small, specific moments of being needed. Not perform neediness. Not asking for help you don't actually want, but finding the genuine places where his experience, his hands, his way of seeing things actually makes a difference to you. Then saying so out loud, specifically, I keep thinking about what you said last week. I think you were right. Would you look at this with me? I trust how you think about these things. I don't need you to fix it. I just wanted to tell you first. Those aren't script. They're invitations. And for a man who has spent the last few years quietly wondering if he still has a place in anyone's story, an invitation like that doesn't just feel good. Feels like finally being let back in. So if you take only one thing away from this, let it be this. A man over 60 doesn't need you to chase him, or to disappear, or to play games he stopped playing decades ago. Needs to know 3 things, said plainly in your own words: that you choose to be there, that you still see who he's always been, and that he's still needed for something real. You don't have to do all 3 tonight. Pick one. Maybe it's a phone call at 7, just to hear his voice. Maybe it's noticing something true about him out loud. Maybe it's simply asking for his opinion on something that actually matters to you. Start there. The rest tends to follow. This resonated with you. The next thing worth understanding is how to actually say these things, because timing and wording change everything. That's exactly what I want to walk you through next.